Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Sunday morning Parsha class, the Parsha of Vayakhel. Vayakhel is the second to last Parsha, the book of Shemos, the book of Exodus. We found on page 584 in the Good Chumash. Good morning, everyone. Today is a special day in Israel. Today is still Purim in Israel, in Jerusalem, in Yerushalayim, 3-day Purim. Just saw the news this morning where they were saying, no one come to Jerusalem. There's so much traffic just to get all the roads leading into Jerusalem that literally to stand still. You can't get in. You know, people from all over Israel. Like when I spent 2 years in Israel. I was there for Purim, and you celebrate Purim on the regular day, the 14th of Adar, and then we all wanted to go to Jerusalem for the 15th to kind of get Purim again, because in Jerusalem they celebrate on the 15th. So you got like a double Purim. So all people from Israel, are all traveling to Jerusalem today. So it's a special day. We start with a l'chaim on our coffee. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol nihiyah b'dvarei. Okay, so the Parsha of Vayakhel comes after last week's Parsha, the Parsha of Kisisa, that deals with the sin of the golden calf, where 40 days after Moshe ascends the mountain, and the Jewish people were told that he will return after 40 days, and he does not show up. They obviously miscalculated it by a day. And they say we need a new leader. Long story short, the golden calf. Terrible sin. Moshe comes down, breaks the luchot, goes back up, and he's there for another 80 days. And he returns on Yom Kippur. He has a new set of tablets. God has forgiven the Jewish people. He returns to the Jewish people after being away for 120 days. And he has an instruction. We got to build a Mishkan, build a tabernacle. And this is something that has to get done by the people, for the people. They have to donate the various items, various materials that were needed. They got to build it. And as we know the story, the timeline, that it was took about 6 months till it was fully in use, all the way by Rosh Chodesh Nisan, 2 weeks before Passover, is when they had the Mishkan, and that was seen as a part of their atonement for the sin of the golden calf. So this week's Parsha opens up with what happens the day after. Moshe descends from the mountain on Yom Kippur. The next morning, everyone wants to hear, well, what does Moshe have to say? He's been away for so long. He's been away. It's not like, sometimes someone goes away. I was in Israel for a week, come back. Okay, tell me about your trip. How was it? Okay. Moshe was away with just a few, he had a showing. He had an appearance. He came down. He broke the luchot. He went back up for 120 days. He's on the mountain as a human, like an angel. Didn't eat, didn't sleep. He was, however you explain it, he was up there learning and speaking to God, right? Like it says last week's Parsha, panim al panim, face to face, like no other prophet. And what was he doing there? For the most part, he was studying the Torah. God was giving him the entire Torah, the written Torah, the oral Torah was given to Moshe during this period of time. So now Moshe returns. You want to hear, Moshe, what do you have to say? So the Parsha opens up, Vayakhel Moshe. Moshe gathers the Jewish people. Who does he gather? As Kol Adas B'nai Yisrael, the entire community of Israel. And he tells them, these are the words that God has commanded for us to do. Now, what's the very, very first thing he says? Very, very first thing he says is, Sheishes Yomim Te'aseh Melacha. For 6 days, work should be done, or may be done. Uvayoyim HaShvi'i Yihi Yolachem Kodesh Shabbos and Hashem. And on the 7th day, it's going to be a holy day. It is going to be Shabbos for Hashem. Kol ha'osav malacha yumas. Whoever does work on this day should be put to death. You should not kindle fire in any of your dwelling places. The Yom Shabbos on the day of Shabbos. Now, was this news to them? Have they heard of Shabbos before? So the answer is yes. If you remember, when they received the manna from heaven, which happened before the giving of the Torah, right?
Double portions.
So on Friday, suddenly they found they got a double portion, and they knew how strict the rules were not to take any more than the allowed amount. And they came running to Moshe. What's going on over here? We got a double portion. And Moshe said, "Okay, it's Friday. Tomorrow is Shabbos, and on Shabbos, we're not going to collect any money. In fact, the money is not going to fall from heaven on Shabbos. It's just Friday. You get a double portion, and then they get the idea of the Shabbos is a day of rest. Okay, so they heard it then already. Then a few weeks later, at the mountain, at the giving of the Torah on Mount Sinai, again, one of the 10 commandments is to remember the Shabbos and keep it holy. God took us out of it. God created the world in 6 days, rested on the seventh. God took us out of Egypt. We got to remember the Shabbos. So the concept of Shabbos wasn't new to them. Moshe comes down the mountain and he tells them, okay, 6 days work should be done. The seventh, you rest. Okay, so obviously there's something here that Moshe is adding. There's some nuances over here. One interesting thing is, if you notice, if you like to see it in the Hebrew grammar, it says Sheishes Yamim Te'aseh Melacha. 6 days work should be done. It doesn't say 6 days you should work. It says work will be done, which is an interesting idea for itself. It teaches us basically, even when the work is being done through the six days, we're only doing part of it. We're only doing our share, but it's really being done for us. God is really the one that's providing throughout the week as well. And if we have that proper perspective, that even during the week, it's te'aseh, it's being done. In other words, we're helping out something that's being done, by a power greater than us. Then we'll also recognize that it's okay to take off Shabbos, because even though we think sometimes Shabbos is the busiest day, it's the best day for business, but ultimately, if we believe that God is the ultimate provider, so then it'll be easier for us to be able to take off that day. But there's another very, very important message with Shabbos, and that is because God told us not to work on Shabbos, but God never told us what is the definition of work. Don't go to work. What does that mean? Does that mean I can't go to the office? Does that mean I can't move heavy furniture? Does that mean I can't sweat on taking care of my kids? I mean, could I water my garden? Right? Could I help around the house? One of my Pesach jokes is where the husband comes into the kitchen and asks his wife, how could I help? And she says, I think the best help would be if you just stepped out of the kitchen for a while. That's the best help. Oh, okay, no problem. 5 minutes later, he's back in the kitchen. She says, what happened? He says, how long do you expect me to help for?
I haven't heard that one.
Okay, there you go. Look at that. Okay. So what is the definition of work? Right? Everything in Torah is exact, right? There's no ambiguous, no just like gray areas. Hey, work. No, what exactly is the Torah definition of do not do work? What is work? All the Torah says is to remember the Shabbos, to guard the Shabbos, work during the week, don't work on Shabbos. But what does that mean? So here is
yeah, Rabbi, he's on Shabbos, he has to lead the prayers, and is that work?
Yes, like they say, rabbis rest for 6 days and work on the seventh.
Okay.
So that's a good. So that's a good question, Michael. What exactly is work, right? Rabbis are being employed for Shabbos, right? You can hire a chazan for Shabbos, you hire a rabbi for Shabbos, and and they're doing their job, right? So what exactly is work? It's a great question, right? Does that mean you can't do any work on Shabbos? Okay, we'll get to that. So really, the answer to this is by Moshe repeating this mitzvah of not working on Shabbos and resting on Shabbos really gives us some insight to what it means not to work on Shabbos. And that is because the juxtaposition of this mitzvah to the next thing that Moshe says. What's item number 2 on his list of things to say the next day after you get down from the mountain? So we continue with verse 4 and pretty much the rest of the parsha. Vayomer Moshe el kol adas bnei Yisrael levar. Moshe spoke to the entire community of Israel. Zeh hadavar asher tziva Hashem. This is what God commanded us. K'chu me'itchem truma. We got to take donations from you. And he goes on to explain all the various materials needed for the Mishkan. And basically the whole Parsha and next week's Parsha kind of repeat a lot of what we know already from the previous Parshas, where all the material needed for the Mishkan, how it should be built, and basically, and the story tells us how it was built, pretty much exactly as it was. It was commanded in the previous Parsha. So the Parsha really continues on with the building of the Mishkan. So right over here, we are told that the reason why Moshe started with the laws of Shabbos and then went on with the idea of building the Mishkan, because Moshe was telling us that the building of the Mishkan is not allowed to be done on Shabbos because you're not allowed to work on Shabbos. So because you're not allowed to work on Shabbos, you're not allowed to build the Mishkan on Shabbos. Now, that's not just a technical thing. Historically, we should know that they didn't build the Mishkan on Shabbos. It really gives us an opening to understand what it means to work on Shabbos, because now we know that building the Mishkan was considered work. The first time we know that they refrained from doing something on Shabbos. What was that? They didn't do the Mishkan. And therefore, we have a tradition in the oral Torah that we analyze the various steps in building the Mishkan, and the sages broke it down into 39 categories of work. And this is the base to what it means not to work on Shabbos, not to do these 39 categories and this many subcategories that come from it. That is what Shabbos is all about. Now, which is interesting because many of us know Shabbos from experience. And in general, I think most Jews today are what we call the experiential Jews, that we know Judaism from experience. We know it from growing up, from our home, we know it from our community, or even someone who has not grown up and with Judaism, but they join a community. So you learn about what it means to be Jewish from seeing how other people are doing it, right? Even if someone did not grow up with Shabbos, for example, but if they join others, I'm joining a family, I'm joining a synagogue, and they see what Shabbos is, what we do on Shabbos and what we don't do on Shabbos. From that experience, I kind of pick up what it means to keep Shabbos. But what's interesting is that the way we keep Shabbos today was developed over so many years based on the written Torah, the oral Torah, many of the rabbinic enactments. There are many customs involved, and all together make up the Shabbos experience as we know today. When we think of Shabbos, we think of coming to synagogue Friday night, singing L'Chadodi, making Kiddush on wine, having challah and gefilte fish and cholent and whatever other Shabbos meal, singing songs, having Shabbos dinner, right? There's a lot of beauty to Shabbos. And we think about not being together with community, being together with family. Then there's also the don'ts, right? So we don't use technology, we don't use electricity, the lights and the driving and all that stuff, right? Is what we kind of associate with Shabbos. Now, obviously, that's all part of Shabbos, but if you look at the scripture, like the biblical Shabbos, then you look at the rabbinic Shabbos, then you look at the customs of Shabbos, you realize that there's a lot to Shabbos that make up the beautiful experience as we have today. So when it comes to not doing work on Shabbos, which is, by the way, just a very important part of Shabbos, but there's in general, you can split the Shabbos experience into two, into the do's and the don'ts, right? Which is interesting. If you notice in the Ten Commandments, We know that the Ten Commandments were written twice in the Torah, once in Exodus and once in Deuteronomy, right? In the original story of the giving of the Torah and the Parsha of Yisro we had a few weeks ago in the book of Shemos and Exodus, it says the commandment of keeping Shabbos is Zachor et Yom HaShabbat l'kadsho. Remember the Shabbos to sanctify it. And the second time that it's repeated by Moshe before he dies in Devarim in Deuteronomy, over there we change the words a little bit. We say Shamar es Yom HaShabbat l'kadsho, to guard the Shabbos, to keep the Shabbos, to guard the Shabbos and sanctify it. So is it to remember or is it to guard? So to remember is really focusing on the do's, what we do, what we have to do to remember it. So we make the Kiddush, we sanctify it in words, and which is a biblical commandment. And then the rabbinic commandment was to also sanctify it over a cup of wine. So that's why we both in our prayers we mention the holiness of Shabbos, and then we repeated it again before dinner or during dinner on a cup of wine. That's rabbinic. So the biblical is to mention once. The rabbinic is to do it over a cup of wine. Rabbinic is also to light Shabbos candles. That's a rabbinic mitzvah. To sanctify the Shabbos by lighting candles. To usher in the Shabbos through candle lighting. That's a rabbinic mitzvah. But that's all in the do's, right? To have a Shabbos dinner, to do the prayers, to all the beautiful things that we do on Shabbos is really included in the Zachor, and to remember the Shabbos and make it holy. But then we have the guard the Shabbos, which is the don'ts. So don't do malacha, don't do work. Refrain from doing certain things that we do during the week. That is what we don't do on Shabbos. But talking about the shamor, the guarding the Shabbos, and what we don't do on Shabbos.
Is that on the second tablets? Weren't the first, when the two didn't Shabbos?
So how did it work on the tablets is a good question, because we're told that it was actually said simultaneously, right? Something that a human cannot do. But Shamor and Zachor were said exactly at the same time. If you're familiar with the Lecha Dodi, right? Lecha, I don't know what tune you sing it in. Lecha Dodi Likrat Kala. So one of the things that we say,
You have to make the second tablets and then put the same things put on.
But it says both. It says, remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. So that's the do's, and keep it holy.
no, to keep it holy is make it holy, but meaning remember the Shabbos and guard the Shabbos. The first word of that sentence, what did it say? Did it say remember or did it say to guard? I'm just looking inside quickly. If you look on page 473, verse 8. I'm sorry, verse 8, yes. Remember the Shabbos, on page 473. That was the first tablets, right? Or in Hebrew, Zachor, on page 472. That is the first one. And then the second one, in Deuteronomy, you have in Ve'et Hanan, so that would be on page. Yeah, that's when he addressed the Jewish people, and he was recounting what happened, and he repeats the Ten Commandments as a story. Now, we were there, but he says what happened. But there are some minor differences between the two, and this is one of the differences.
Second tablet, you mean the second set of tablets or the?
So I'll talk about the tablets in a moment. But before we get to the tablets, the Ten Commandments were given once. It was one time, but it's written in the Torah twice. Once in its original, story, and then Moshe, before he dies, he repeats. He says, "This is what happened." So he repeats the story, and when he repeats the story of the giving of the Torah, he also says that he repeats the Ten Commandments, and there are subtle differences. And one of them is in this commandment we see on page 1158, 1159, verse 12. Where it says the same verse, but instead of saying remember the Shabbos, it says guard the Shabbos, right? So either remember the Shabbat day and to sanctify it, or guard the Shabbat day to sanctify it, right? So it's the same commandment, but is it guard or is it to remember? So in the L'chadodi, what does it say? In the first stanza, it says, Shamor v'zachor b'dibur echad. Hishmiyanu kel hamiyuchad. Observe and remember, right? These two words, Shamor and Zachor, these two words of the Ten Commandments, of the commandment of Shabbos, to observe and to remember. He's here saying Shamor, not guard or observe, okay? The one and only God caused us to hear in a single utterance, right? So a single utterance. He said it at the exact same time, not just one after another, very quickly. Shamor v'Zachor. He said it at the same time, which we obviously can't understand what that means, but so they were both said. So the reason why one time it says Zachor, one time it says Shamor, because they're both right. He said both. Now, what did it say on the tablets? I know I remember that the commentaries talk about it. I don't remember offhand exactly if it said both or if it said one. If one said that, I don't know. The tablets, I believe both of them said the same thing because the first tablets were broken. Then he basically remade the tablets, a new set of tablets. But did it say Shamor or Zachor, or did it say both? I don't remember. I remember there was some type of like miraculous thing about it, but I don't want to say offhand anything about that. But the idea is that Shabbos has both of these ideas. There's the dues of Shabbos. How do we make Shabbos, to remember Shabbos, the Kiddush and all that. And then we have what we don't do on Shabbos, what we refrain from doing on Shabbos. And like we spoke many times about the attitude to Shabbos of the don'ts that we don't do on Shabbos is really, yes, there are many, many laws of what we're not allowed to do, but it's really about allowing us to focus on the remembering Shabbos. In order that we should be able to focus on the remembering Shabbos, you also have to take away all the distractions, right? It's like we said, if you were like at your wedding, night of your wedding, you're under the chuppah. It's like this wedding ceremony. You've been waiting for this moment for years, right? Does someone have to tell you like, hey, don't check your email right now. Don't check your text right now. Like you're at the, of course not. Like
Maybe today we might.
It's like, hello. It reminds me of the story of the funeral, right? Where someone asked the rabbi in the cemetery, says, is it like, what's the Wi-Fi password here? So the rabbi says, we're in a cemetery. He says, is that lowercase or capital? I used to say this joke, but then when COVID came around, then we're all doing like these Zoom funerals. I'm like, this is not a joke anymore. Cemetery's got to start getting Wi-Fi. Anyways, so where were we? Right. So if you're at the wedding day, right? So all the guarding, all the don'ts of Shabbos is really allowing us to focus on Shabbos, right? Without the distractions. Right? And today we know about it with like technology, right? Because we're so consumed with technology, and just giving us a day of, hey, I'm just not looking at my phone today. I just saw an interview with someone, Ari Lesser. I don't know if you ever heard of him. Look him up online. He's like this great rapper, a Jewish rapper, and he does like all these amazing.
Big guy with a hat.
He has a hat, little ponytail.
Yeah.
He has one on L'chaim, a Kapurim one. Amazing. Rhyme and rap and like very like meaningful. Like it has like a lot of like he has like one on Tanya, like a rap on Tanya. Anyways, so I heard his interview and he was saying like, I'm so addicted to my phone. Like all day long, I'm just like checking WhatsApps and checking updates and checking social media. Like I'm so addicted. He said, imagine I didn't have Shabbos. He's like, I can't even fathom what people do without Shabbos, where there's really no time that you're not on your phone. Like he said, at least one day a week, I'm not touching my phone. Like I get a break. But and like I was like, be a normal person. But otherwise, we're so addicted to technology and it's just like 24/7. We never get a break from it. So it's like a gift. It's a gift that we have like set up in our system of our life, that we have time away from technology. But kind of going back to this, the way Shabbos was developed, that we have this like this experience of Shabbos. So we know Shabbos, and when we, the way it's just celebrated with, in the communities and families. And there are like these common misconceptions of what is work on Shabbos, right? So don't do work. What does work mean? So some people think that work is like employment, like Michael pointed out. Work is employment, right? So I don't go to work on Shabbos. So I don't go to my job. I don't go to the office. I don't do my sales. I don't do whatever job I'm doing. I don't do it on Shabbos. I don't get employed on Shabbos. So that is a reason why I was saying it's a misconception is although for the most part employment is forbidden on Shabbos, but it's not the definition of work. Like there are some technical ways to be employed on Shabbos as well. Like I said, a rabbi is employed on Shabbos. You could hire a chazan, you could hire a babysitter, you could hire someone to do work for you on Shabbos. I mean, there's ways to do it that should be done also rabbinically, okay, but for the most part, that's not the essential definition of work, right? It's not employment. Another misconception is that work on Shabbos is toil, like working hard, laboring, right? So the example is given like, am I able to move heavy furniture on Shabbos? I'm sweating, it's hard, it's a physical labor. Is that considered work on Shabbos? And the answer again is that not necessarily. If there's a certain definition of work and it's not necessarily labor, hard toil. A third, and probably the most common misconception of what is work on Shabbos is technology, right? Because today we live in a world of technology. Everything is electricity. So we refrain from technology, which is true. We don't use technology on Shabbos. And for many people, that is pretty much the definition of work. Refrain from technology. So we don't drive the car. We don't use electricity. We don't use our phones. We don't use our computers. We don't use our microphone. We don't watch movies, right? We refrain from technology, which is obviously a big, big part of our life today. So just that alone is already like, wow, I'm like free from all that. So it already allows us to focus on what's most important. But is that the definition of work? And the answer again is no. Yes, these are forbidden for technical reasons. Each one, why is it forbidden? Because it falls into another category or the true category of work. And what is the true category of work? And like we said, in this week's Parsha, it gives us the answer. Building the Mishkan is work. No, they did not use any electricity in building the Mishkan. We break it down to 39 categories. This is what work is. And I just want to give you an example. And I brought this book over here, which is a fascinating set. There's a four-volume set of the 39 melachot, 39 categories of work on Shabbos. It's by a man by the name of David Ribia. Just this week, I just happened to be listening to a podcast, and someone referenced this set. And he says, this man, Rabbi Ribia, was actually, or maybe still today, he's a school teacher. He teaches kids in school, and he would teach the laws of Shabbos. And he would do a very thorough job in putting out different sheets and stencils, and eventually he realized he has such a beautiful work. He put it together as a book. It's an amazing book, 4-set volume, great detail. So if it's a lot of information in there, but it's an amazing set to get a real understanding of what it means to refrain from doing work on Shabbos. And just as an example of some of the categories of work. Okay, so we know that the Mishkan was built with with beams, right? The walls of the Mishkan. So the Mishkan was a temporary dwelling, right? So it was built in a way where it could easily be assembled and disassembled. So they had to assemble it, they built it, it stood sometimes for a day, for a week, for a month, for a year. And then, okay, we got to travel. So they would quickly dismantle it, and then they would travel with it, and then erect it again, right? So it was one of those, like a tent, right? It was one of those things that could be easily put together and taken apart. So it was built with these about 15 feet tall wooden beams, and I think there were 20 on each side, and there was like these poles going through it. And there were sockets holding it from the right. It was a whole. You can read the details inside. This was like the structure of the Mishkan. So putting these things together is called building. So one of the categories of work is you cannot build. You cannot build on Shabbos, which is sometimes it could be very practical, right? For example, we have these dividing walls over here. Are you allowed to open and close it on Shabbos? Are you allowed to open? Are you allowed to close them on Shabbos? Are you considered building a wall? So we go into greater detail to understand, well, what is the definition of building, right? So in the Mishkan, they would build these beams and then they would put something through it, right? To keep it together, to hold it together, hold it in place. If you just put beams one next to another, you're not really building, right? So now the question is, are these locked into each other? Are they not locked into each other? And these walls are actually not locked into each other. Even when, first of all, you could close it without locking it, right? And then there's also, even when you do lock it, they're actually, it just pressure points top and bottom, right? To the floor and to the ceiling. They're not actually locked into each other. So, I mean, it gets very nuanced and very specific, but the idea is that is considered work because in the Mishkan, that's what it was done. And then you got to go into the details to find exactly, well, how was it done? And what is the exact definition? But that's a broad definition, right? So one of the categories of work is building. And of course, also dismantling, because they also have to dismantle it sometimes, right? When they have to travel. So building and dismantling is two of the categories. And then they also had, I don't do a lot of building around the house, but one of the things that I do is I build a sukkah. When I build a sukkah, one of my previous versions of my sukkah is I had different panels, and I had to connect all the panels. And every year I got to figure out, well, which panel went where. So I had to start marking them. So I marked 1, 2, 3, 4, and like arrows that went this way and that way, right? East, west, whatever markings you make. So you know when you put it back together where each panel goes. They said they did the same thing in the Mishkan. They would mark the various beams to know which one went where, so they know how to put it back together. So, right, the first IKEA. Me and my wife always have this argument about salad bars at events. My mother-in-law loves salad bars. And I always hate the salad bars. I said, I feel like when I go to a salad bar, I'm walking into IKEA. Like here's all the ingredients, make it yourself. Anyways.
Good point.
So they used to mark the beams. How would they mark the beam? They would write something, however they wrote those days, right? With a quill, whatever it was, right? So there you go. Writing is another category of work. So we don't write on Shabbos. Sometimes they would write, they would make a mistake, you got to erase. So writing and erasing are another two categories of work. Right? They also needed coals and fire to work with the metal, to melt it, or to bend it. So they had to make fires to build the Mishkan. So making a fire is one of the categories of work. And then sometimes they have to extinguish the fire to get the coals. So you got to extinguish. So again, another two categories of work is fire, kindling a fire, and extinguishing a fire. Right? So these are all very broad categories because making a fire can mean a million things. Maybe turning on a light bulb. Is that making a fire? Perhaps. Is it building? You're building a circuit of electricity? Perhaps. Igniting the engine of a car, the sparks going out, maybe that's a fire, right? So we took these categories, 39 categories of the Torah, based on the Mishkan. And from there, we have all the various ways of things that we don't do on Shabbos. So could I go to the office and be employed on Shabbos? Perhaps not. Depends on what I'm doing, right? Because obviously we don't use a lot of technologies. That's the technical. We don't drive on Shabbos. And we also don't we don't write. So if you have to use a pen, right, it gets very complicated. And then there's also other rabbinic prohibitions to Shabbos as well, not to do business and things like that, not to handle money. But from a biblical standpoint, it's really about these 39 categories and the subcategories to it. So what is it? What is like the idea behind it? See, in Hebrew, it's called melacha. In English, we loosely translated it as work, not to do work. But it's not really about work. It's really perhaps a more accurate translation would be creative work. Because if you look at all of the 39 categories, what like the common denominator between all these categories is we are changing the status of something. We're changing the status. So before there was no fire, now there is a fire. Before there was a fire, now there's no fire. I built something, I dismantled something, right? Moving furniture from one place to another place, although it may be a lot of labor, I haven't changed the status of something, right? If I baked, if I cooked, right, I changed it from being raw to being cooked. If I, right, all of these categories, I've created something, I've changed, I've manipulated the world into something that it wasn't before. That is the definition of melacha, of work on Shabbos. So I could, how much effort does it take to switch to turn on the light switch? It's effortless. It's still considered work, because it's not about how much work it takes to do it, but it's about the outcome. What am I doing? Am I changing something? Am I changing something? That is the category. That is the definition of work on Shabbos. So what the Torah says on Shabbos is, look at the Mishkan, so you know what it is. But the idea behind it is, for 6 days, do work. What does it mean, do work? Work the world. Change the world. Manipulate the world. Why? It's not just allowed, it's actually a mitzvah. We're supposed to work. Because we know that God tells us, God wants us to be partners with Him in creation. God created the world incomplete. And God needs Michael and Jill and Lance and Tom and Diane and Dina and Mendel to partner with Him in creating the world. How is that done? Throughout the week, that we are manipulating the world, we are changing the status of the world, we are essentially helping Him create the world. And obviously, if you're doing it for the right purpose, we're elevating it, we're bringing godliness into it, we're bringing holiness into it, and we are partners in creation. But one day a week, God says, just like after I created the world in 6 days, I rested. I want you to rest as well. I want you to give the world a break. Just take a day off. And ultimately, that is like expressing our belief in God, that ultimately God is the creator of the world, and the world is going to be fine without us, because ultimately He provides. So taking a step back from manipulating the world around us. That's really what Malacha is all about. It's not necessarily about toil, it's really about, do I have the ability, do I have the right to change something in this world? Yes, for 6 days, not for the 7th. Yes.
Before even giving a tour and they were leaving Egypt with the manna, do you think God created Shabbos beforehand? I mean, like in the beginning?
So Shabbos was created right after the 6 days of creation. It says on the 7th day He rested, right? So God rested on the 7th day. And the Talmud says that the world was complete after 6 days. One thing that was missing was rest. The concept of rest, right? There are some societies. See, today, we talk about the gifts that Judaism gave to the world. The gift that Judaism gave to the world is Shabbos. One of the gifts is Shabbos. The concept that the work week shouldn't be every day, right? There's so maybe even till today, societies, but like certain places, there's never a day off. There's never a day off. You go to work every single day, which is, you could think, wow, it's amazing, right? No, we need a day off, not just because we're tired and we need a day off, because the day off gives us time to recalibrate, to refocus, gives us a day to say, okay, well, I'm going to work for 6 days. Why am I going to the work in 6 days, right? It gives us time to think about the why, not just the how and the what. Why am I going to work? What is life all about, right? You think about the why, then we're able to focus, and what's his name? Viktor Frankl said that if you have a why, we can get through any how. You need a why. Like, why are we doing this? Why are we living? Why are we going to work? Why are we raising a family? What's life all about? So Shabbos allows us to focus on that. It connects us with God. You know that we have a mission. We're trying to make the world a better place, right? That relationship with Hashem is, we don't have time during the week. We're so busy from thing to thing to thing. We don't have time to think. Shabbos gives us some time. Shabbos, because we're taking ourselves away from manipulating the world around us, it's a time to think about ourselves and God. Time to focus on our prayer. Time to focus on our study. Time to focus on family. Right? The fact that we have a family meal every week, it's something that's part of Shabbos. To spend time to hear from your children, hear from the grandchildren, right? That's what Shabbos is really all about. It's the why, right? So this is the societies that don't have that. It's like robotic. We just do it because we have to do it, but there's no engine behind it. So that's really what this parsha is telling us. It's not just repeating again. And Shabbos is mentioned multiple times throughout the Torah. But over here specifically, it gives us the insight of what it means to keep Shabbos. It means the work from the Mishkan, which is these categories of work. And the idea behind it is it's creative work, things that were done to create something new. Those are the things that we step back from. During the week, we're involved in the world, we're partners with God. On Shabbos, take a step back. One of the most amazing stories, and I know I said it before, but I'll say it again because I think it's an amazing story about Shabbos, is with a man, actually Rabbi Nemes's good friend, Kivi Bernard, who lives today in Atlanta, based from South Africa. His father was a great rabbi in South Africa that Rabbi Nemes was very close with, very fond of. But he's a businessman in Atlanta. He wrote a book, I think it's called Leopardology. He compared, it was a book on business, strategy of business. And evidently it was a bestseller, it was a great book. And the upper, the leadership of Microsoft got a hold of it, and they really loved it. So at one of their upcoming conferences, which was a big idea, the Microsoft conference and all the big shots of Microsoft, Bill Gates and all that, leadership people were going to be there. And in one of the main, keynotes or opening sessions, they wanted Mr. Bernard to speak as a very prominent, position in this conference. And they called him, and obviously it was a very prestigious offer, and maybe financially and for his career, it would have been a great opportunity. And he was very excited that they called him. And looking at the scheduling, of course, turns out that his talk is scheduled for Shabbos. So he tells them, "I'm really sorry. I'm very honored with this offer, but I can't do it on Shabbos." And they weren't happy with that. And they said, "Okay, what do we have to? How much do we have to pay you? How much do we have to pay you to make it?" They offered double. They actually went to double the amount. And he said no. And they really started throwing money at him. They said, "We'll give you whatever, a ridiculous amount of money." Like they were really willing to give a lot for him to come. And he said, "You can give me $1 million. I can't come. It's not going to work. I can't come on Shabbos." And they're very surprised with that. A few days later, he gets a call that we've moved around the schedule. We have a spot for you during the week. Are you willing to take it? So yeah, for $1 million. No, but he said yes. So he got it. So later he was talking to them and he said, "Let me tell you what happened." He said, "We were speaking to Bill Gates about the conference, and your name came up, and he asked what's going on with him. So we said that we don't get it. Like he's a Shabbos observer, but we were willing to pay an observant amount of money, and he still wasn't going to come on Shabbos." And Bill Gates said, "I've always heard of people who have ideals that are greater than financial gain, but I never actually witnessed someone like actually who lives by this. To have someone who a Shabbos is more important than any money. That's someone that we really need on our team." So he said, "Let's work things out, move things around to make it work." That's what Shabbos is. Shabbos for the Jew. It says more than the Jew keeps Shabbos, Shabbos keeps the Jew, right? It keeps us going, right? What is the key to Jewish survival? We don't know the answer. It's many things put together. Obviously, it's miraculous, but one of the things is the idea of Shabbos. Take the time once a week to say, "I'm taking a step back from the busy world, and allowing myself to focus on the why, on my connection with God." That really, we only stand to benefit from this for our children and our grandchildren, for all generations. So I'll leave you with that. It's my little thought of the week. Thank you for joining us. Shavua Tov. Have a wonderful week. And I wanted to mention All right. This class was dedicated to, in honor of Shlomo Ben Tzvi Hirsch, Lance Turkish's father, whose yard was just a few days ago. And may the study, learning it today, be a big schus for his neshama. May his neshama have an aliyah. So thank you.
Very nice.
Yes, and a very important announcement. You might have seen this in our email that next Tuesday, like in a week and a half, Tuesday, the 25th, for those who are here locally, we will have a class at Joe Halpern's house, 10:30 in the morning, Tuesday morning, 10:30 in the morning in Joel Halpern's house. You don't want to miss it. It's a great class, great camaraderie, great, we'll have a little nice little talk. So if you're in town, we'd love to see you there. PM me for an address, and yeah, hope to see you. All the best.